Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. So a few months ago, before lockdown began, I went and did some filming with a group called Destrier, and Destria are well known for their skillet arms and jousting demonstrations at British and in some cases overseas living history events, and they're very well known and been around for a long time, but over the years I've known several members of Destria, and so I thought I'd go along, meet up with them. It was their invitation actually, so thank you very much to Destria for that. I have filmed with them in the past and I'm sure I will do again. But we got the chance to look at some training before the season began. As we found out, the season never did begin because lockdown happened instead. But they were training in the run-up to season beginning of 2020. And we also got the chance to look at some armour being put on as well. So let's have a little look at what I filmed when I was there. Hopefully it'll be of interest. We get to see some horses, we get to see some armour, and chat about the kinds of things that people watching this channel like. So enjoy. Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. I'm here with the mounted combat group Destria, and at the moment we're just armouring up. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little look at how someone puts 15th century, mid to late 15th century plate harness on, plate armour, a suit of armour commonly known as, how it goes on, starting with an arming doublet. We've got some of the underclothes, so from the waist down is non-historical, but the arming doublet waist up is historical. And we're going to look at how does the armour go on, what order does it go on, how does it look like, and we'll have a little talk to Nick as well about, you know, how different things function and how they feel. So what's going on here? First of all, we've got the arming doublet, and we currently have some leg harness being pointed or tied to it. Do you want to tell us a bit about it? Do you want to introduce yourself first for the viewers?
Before you tie them off, we need to
Destrier. What is going on now is
actually what you need to do.
Two sets of legs.
You need to lift your knee up,
which are in this case is in two pieces. You have the lower leg, which is taken up by the greave, and you have the upper leg, which is taken up by your cuisse and your hardened knee as a one piece. This is quite common in Italian armours of the period. Hook it underneath there, please.
So what we've got is essentially under this we've got shoes, hose, which are the trouser part, and then we've got an arming doublet. Do you wear a shirt under your arming doublet or straight on?
No, straight on.
Straight onto the body?
Yep, because the shirt tends to, when you ride, tends to bunch up and come up, and you get the same thing that a professional marathon runner would eventually get, which is bleeding nipples.
Oh, lovely! Yeah, well, yeah, we don't want bleeding nipples.
No,
not in the pub. I should mention we are filming in a pub, and that's in these parts. That's where you traditionally put your armour on. So on the lower legs, we've got the greaves, which are filling, closing the front and back of the shins, basically, and they come up to just under the knee, and they should be able to be worn by themselves, shouldn't they? They should stay where they are. They're pretty closely fitted pieces of armour. And then you can see the upper leg gets tied to the lower edge of the arming doublet. And then there's a strap, which you can just see dangling down here. There's a strap which goes around the back of the greave, and there is a hook, isn't there? There's a hook around the back of there that the strap goes under. So, but that's not so much to keep the greaves up, is it?
Wait, I'll find a greave.
No, the factor with the hook is that with the lower part here, you need to keep it secured on this pin so it moves as a discrete unit.
Yeah.
So the hook stops the strap slipping up and this coming apart and jamming.
Right, good. So it helps them to work basically as a unit, but it still gives you lots of flexibility.
Right.
So these upper leg defences, you can see that the plates don't go around on the inside, so some harnesses do go around the inside. You see that they come around on the outside, so I'll just move around, if I may, around to here. There we go, so you can see that they go around the outside of the leg, which of course if you're sitting on a horse would be exposed. The inside of the leg would be against the saddle and protected most of the time. That is a point of vulnerability, isn't it? But I guess there are benefits and
Nope, it's fine.
there are pluses and minuses, aren't there, to having a fully enclosed leg?
Yep. We are.
I mean, certainly for mounted cavalry, the contact of the upper thighs is the main point of communication between the rider and the horse.
Yeah.
So if that's encased, it renders you virtually unable to ride.
Yeah.
In the tournament armours designed for working with poleaxe on foot, that's when you get the fully enclosing elements.
So now we've got the cuirass. So it's a breastplate and a backplate with what's called a fold, which the fold is obviously the skirt essentially, and they come apart. There is the true breastplate and backplate.
Right, shoulder points over.
So this encases the upper part of the
Full closure, or is there
torso,
a
the thorax.
The second hole.
So this is essentially protecting your kind of ribcage area front and back, isn't it? And initially, before this lower part was developed, so if you're looking at the kind of late 14th century, these plates developed independently of this lower part, which is known as the placard. So could you tell the viewers what style of harness is this?
It's Milanese.
Yeah.
You can tell by the more globose style. Milanese armour has the shapes the Italians like to fight on horseback.
Yeah.
So it's designed really to deflect lance and glancing blows on horseback. The more wasp-waisted, fluted armour is Gothic, which is German. Again, more fighting in city-states and castles. So it's designed for a slightly different job. Whereas this, as you can see, everything swoops away. And if we could just look at your waist, if a lance hits here, it's going to move up, out.
Yeah.
And so that rounded shape is very important.
And I guess also this kind of dome shape it gives strength as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
Structural kind of impact resistance, shall we say?
You've got the upper part and the lower part are sprung or slung on these two leather straps. So he's able to tilt left and right and adjust his weight in the saddle in a way the composite Gothic harnesses, where it's all one clamshell, don't move. So it's very, very much more suited to use on horseback.
Thanks. And I think something worth mentioning as well is where the waist is, so that the waist is at the natural waist, isn't it? It's the sort of point of where the body bends. And on a lot of, if viewers watch a lot of movies or TV series like Game of Thrones or whatever, they'll often, one of the things you'll notice, they often put the waist on movie armour too low, don't they? Because they want it to be kind of almost where the belt is on a modern person, and if you put it down there, you can't move properly because the body wants to articulate in the middle. So it does give this almost insect-like, as you say, wasp-waisted look, doesn't it? There we go.
Yep.
Valves moving okay?
Yep.
Cool.
So the lower full, we often refer to that, or a lot of people refer to that as a skirt, but it's not really where a skirt would be. It's actually much higher up than that. The full really is protecting more the stomach and the upper abdomen area. I know some viewers will be wondering about your groin. Tell us about, so how usually would that area be protected?
Well, there is a male, I'm going to use the word skirt again, just for just to make things easier. That would normally have, I would have worn earlier, but unfortunately it's in a state of slight disrepair.
Okay.
So it's not really available right now. Standard. Where is it standard? It's in there.
And in fact,
where the helmet is.
some Milanese armours, an entire male shirt was worn underneath, particularly sort of the 1460s era. It's more common to have the complete shirt rather than the skirt and voiders, which are the sort of crop tops with arm sleeves.
That's the one.
And so I think it's, again, I think it's an interesting point that a lot of people would assume that in the age of plate armour, the plate is the only armour, but of course mail was still very important, wasn't it?
Where you've got an articulated area, certainly before sort of Henry VIII's period, if you look at his harness,
You have to pass the.
you've
points
got
through as well.
much more covered articulations. In the 15th century Italianate armours, there are these gaps. You've got a gap under the arm here. You've got a gap under the arm here. You've got a gap, obviously, where the legs are, and you've got the backside. Even if you've got a low cullet plate, which you wouldn't wear in the saddle for fighting on foot, you've got these gaps. And the male moves and covers these weak points.
Hold it, I need to feed it down inside his front.
So what's going on at the moment? This is a standard, isn't it?
Standard, and the standard really.
We need to put the points.
Feed the points through.
So it's obviously protecting the neck, and it's a flexible mail or chainmail, as some people would call it, defence around the throat. But it also, I guess, provides some degree of protection from the armour as well, doesn't it?
Armour and whiplash.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if you get hit at any speed on the helmet, it snaps back. So having a 2 to 3 inch leather collar with mail on it gives you some protection against this.
So it's sort of part gorget, part neck brace, as well as piercing protection as well. So it's like medieval Kevlar.
I mean, we know that some of the knife jackets that are in use with the Indian police are made out of that.
So again, some viewers might not be fully aware, but quite often with this period and this type of armour, it needs to be tightly bonded to your body. It needs to be very tightly fitted, and it needs to be fitted to you, the right proportions, articulating in the right places, so the lengths of the different plates need to correspond to your skeleton and your body. But also you want it to be tightly bound to your body. You don't want it to be floating around wildly away, do you? Because it's just going to get in the way then.
Also chafing and pinching.
Yep. We don't like chafing and pinching.
No. Quite often when you see people disarmed from reenactment battles, they'll have bruises here from where the upper cannon of the arm, particularly this part, has bitten in.
And that's something to, I think, remind people of, is that armour can hurt the wearer if it's not used correctly or if it's not properly fitted. Out of interest, so I've always wondered this and never had a chance to ask, is falling off a horse, if you've ever done it, is falling off a horse in armour particularly nasty?
You best ask this gentleman.
Right.
He has more experience under his belt.
To be honest with you, it's the same as, I mean, obviously you're wearing a complete suit of armour, so you've got, it's like a beetle, you're wearing a carapace.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of impact. It depends on the speed that you fall.
Yeah.
I mean, you're probably going to be very well protected, not concussive. But your head's going to be okay. One of the challenges you might have is maybe some broken ribs.
Yeah.
If you fall in that way, because it depends again how you fall.
Yeah.
or you may with a wrist.
Yes.
You fall here and your wrist is bent this way. The armour coming down on your wrist is going to break your wrist.
So I think
but fundamentally,
yeah,
you're probably going to be. I mean, I'll probably
okay.
come off with armour.
I've seen one of our ex-members thrown forwards from a horse, tuck, roll, come up and draw his sword.
Really?
He was concussed at the time.
That's proper video game kind of move.
And certainly we've had members thrown onto
Try that there. Tell me
hard objects
No, that needs to be a little...
such as fences.
Yeah.
And they've
You bend
landed
your
on
arm
the
and
nape
I'll
at the back here, which would be a broken spine.
Right.
Because my left now,
Quite possibly
I can lift my arm up
like
there.
joint injuries.
This, just
It's
there.
not tied up at the moment, so it'll pull
Alright.
to wherever you want it to be.
That-
Move your arm around. And then
And the armour has prevented the life-changing injuries. It's written it off, but it does have that ability to protect
same as
you.
a car when you have a car crash.
Yeah.
Crumple zones.
Crumple zones.
Although I guess with falling injuries, often like you mentioned, the wrist and I think the collarbone as well is quite a common one, isn't it?
Not so much with armour. To be honest, I've never seen the collarbone go. I've broken these ribs here,
Right.
but that's because when the horse fell,
Yeah.
it just slipped. It was for wet ground. And he fell this way, and obviously all the things coming down that way.
Yeah.
So as I get down, I drove into the ground.
Right.
There.
But actually, it was these ribs
This
here,
needs to be loosened up a bit.
with the weight of him coming down on top of me,
Okay.
that broke these 3 ribs
Right.
on this side of my body.
Right.
But there's the only. I mean, I've come off a number of times where they've been knocked off, or knocked myself off, or slipped, or whatever. Over 20 years of jousting and riding horses, you're gonna have that happen sometimes.
Yeah.
And the only injuries I've ever had is these 3 ribs and this wrist from coming off. So
Right. So
armour does a good job.
yeah, so armour works, and you know something also to I think reiterate is that the arming doublet, so the garment that's worn underneath the armour, is incredibly important. It's not just something you happen to be wearing under your armour. You couldn't wear a hoodie under there or a sweater. The armour has to be tied to it tightly, and the arming doublet has to allow you to move properly, doesn't it? So the arms of the arming doublet are stitched in such a way and designed in such a way that you can.
Well, you can always tell badly poor armour.
Yeah.
If you see someone wearing a really thick padded arming doublet,
It ain't made to fit them.
then you know that the armour's not made to fit them.
Yeah.
Because your armour should be the most expensive suit you've ever worn.
Yeah.
And it should fit you like a glove. And the
Yeah.
better it fits you, the more it allows you to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
It allows you to move, and then to be effective in combat. Because ultimately, why would you wear something? Yes, it offers you protection, but unless you're a killing machine, you're flexible, mobile, and like a tank, then what use is it if you don't have all those things?
Yeah.
You're dead.
Yeah.
Simple.
And you know you're using your arms to fight with, so you need full mobility or as much full mobility as you can have with the armour. You don't want to lift your arms up and have that pull your leg harness up at the bottom, because of course that's the same garment and they're attached. So you want to have.
So it's very much a sort of in the style of the Grand Assiette of the earlier period.
That's a great reference of the last duel, which was the last combat fought in France between 2 feuding knights. Rupert was given permission by the King of France, and this is a trial by combat to the death. And the first knight, they charge, obviously start with lances, charges, doesn't hit him, kills his horse, he goes down, comes up, he's straight back up, he's grabbing the pole axe, he's up, he's ready to fight, because he's fighting for his life. So he has to be, able to do that, and this is how these guys have to be as well.
Yeah.
Strap it down.
So let's talk a little bit about the arm harness here. So we've got Italian style arms, haven't we? I think yes. So essentially they are. So one of the characterised features is they are articulated with lames between the cauter, never know how to say that word, cauter, and the upper cannon and the lower cannon, or rear brace and
You've
van
got the
brace.
van brace and the rear brace, yes.
Yeah. And
About there, Nick? Try that.
they, as you would have seen, they were tied to the arming doublet. So the arms can stay there. They're not joined sort of at the top of the shoulder where you might see the armour finish. That's actually these are the pauldrons. They're actually tied to the upper arm, sort of near the tricep.
Right. Again. Hands behind the head. Yeah, cool.
And then these pauldrons, the shoulder defences, are tied up at the top here, again with points. What are these points made of?
Waxed linen. It's essentially a 4-ply corded lace, which is then soaked in beeswax, and then it's rubbed with your hands to work the wax in. There's an elliptical point on the end, which is where it gets its name from. These, to us, are very expensive because they're a craft industry now.
Yeah.
In the original period, when you'd finished with him after the joust or after the battle, you just slipped a knife in, cut it and thrown it away.
Right.
Very much one use. But the wax binds.
Yeah, so they kind of stick to
Because
to
again,
each other.
if any of these detach, the armour drops, locks, he's immobile, he dies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think you'll be riding in the next.
Does Sir have tassets?
Yes, I do. They're in there. Well, they were there. In there somewhere.
So these a peculiar feature of these Italian pauldrons is they sort of cross over, don't they, almost at the back when the arms are down.
Nick, if you lift your arms up, Nick, if you can lift your arms up facing the mirror.
And I just creep behind you. There we go.
So as he comes up, it covers this gap here and here. But as it comes down, hands down, sir. If it comes right down, they don't quite cross over, but they do protect everything.
And if this didn't come so far, then when he puts the arm up, if you could just put the arm up again,
Just bring this up.
if that didn't come down so far,
Yeah.
then you would have a line to the vulnerable armpit under the back there.
And in fact, on some of the Gothic harnesses we see, you've got very much more smaller defences that are just to here,
Yeah,
but they're always wearing male voiders in this area to cover
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But again,
Thought some
you're
of this
not
was
expecting
gonna
to
be
defend against the kinetic energy of a mounted lance.
Yeah.
The most you're defending against is a poleaxe or a sword, so it can be less and lighter.
Yeah, and we should also just mention and emphasise again that so normally you would have male voiders in here, wouldn't you? So so what you can see, what the viewer can see of the armpits in there, the armpit, and down at the groin, you would normally have either a separate skirt of male, which would be attached to a belt underneath there, and sometimes you have voiders which would be stitched or pointed to the inside of the arms on the arming doublet. But as Rupert mentioned, you could wear a full male shirt, and that was done in Italy sometimes at this period. So sometimes we see in medieval paintings where the armour is being stripped off a person, or they're taking their armour off, and you can see that either a male shirt underneath, or you can see separate male voiders underneath. So there's various different solutions, aren't there, for filling those gaps.
Personally, mine's very similar because it's an English export version. When I'm fighting on foot, particularly when I don't trust the people I'm fighting against, I will wear a male shirt and then a male skirt to protect the lower groin area.
Yeah.
Because even with a single skirt, if you're against a thrust weapon, it can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So double skirting helps limit that without limiting your movement, but it would be uncomfortable and counterproductive on horseback.
Sure. So we're almost fully there now, aren't we? We've got the helmet to go, and could we show the helmet going
Sure.
on?
One last thing though. One
Yeah.
thing that's characteristic of a lot of Italian armours is the accessories. For example, here on the pauldrons, we have extra protection that gets pegged on, both on the left and the right pauldron, as you can see.
Yeah.
There's different attachments depending on what kind of activity you will be taking part in, whether that's foot combat, mounted melee, or the joust. And also, which if I'm not mistaken, you've covered in a previous episode, multiple helmets for different purposes.
Right. Yes.
Yep.
Or sometimes maybe different visors on the
Different
same.
visors,
yeah. So different options. So it's almost like an accessorized set, isn't it? Rather than just one armour for all things.
But that's where the Grand Basset really came.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
The Grand Basset really came from basically, well, I haven't got enough money to go and have a frog-mouth helmet, this helmet, that helmet, and another helmet, because I can't afford it.
Yeah.
So actually the Grand Basset really comes out of the fact that, oh, I can have a melee helmet, a foot combat helmet, and a jousting helmet from one helmet.
Yeah. And this is expensive stuff, so obviously the more uses you can get out of
I mean,
one.
the super rich guys obviously had everything.
I mean, the exchange pieces are really important because you can see the left-hand side here, given that Nicholas is about to joust, is heavily over armoured. You're missing a pin there, sir.
Yeah, but I have more pins in there.
So if he was fighting in a melee or on foot, the boarding plate here and
Other ends are available.
Kute here would be smaller. But because he's expecting to receive mounted lance, they are replacing the shield in this period. He's going to have a targe here to catch the lance, but it's not the mobile shield that you've seen in the 14th century.
Yeah.
You can lock that entire arm and stop a blow. I've done it. On my harness, I've had it configured for foot fighting. I no longer ride. So these are almost identical, and I sometimes wear an Armet. Most of the time I will wear a sallet with a bever here, which is much more flexible for ground fighting, but against a mounted lance would be suicidal.
Yeah. And this sort of lopsided, so very defensive on the left, is initially at least more of an Italian thing, isn't it? It kind of comes from Italy into France and England, and was very much adopted in England by the middle of the 15th century.
You see it on the export harnesses as well.
Yeah.
So basically they'll be more. You haven't got the attachment pieces.
Yeah.
But it's just a heavier gauge
Yeah.
on the left hand side. So you pick up the right arm, the left arm, and the right arm. You can physically feel the difference. In
Yeah.
weight.
Whereas, in comparison, the German armours and the earlier English armours tend to be more symmetrical, don't
Yes.
they? So you tend to have smaller spaulders on the shoulders and these kind of rondels in front of the
We were
armpits.
all desperately waiting patiently for Toby Catwell to release his.
Yeah, we're all.
Which he keeps teasing us with.
We're all excited about Toby's bit, yeah. So, can we just look briefly at the gauntlets, actually? So, gauntlets are something that anybody who gets involved with reenactment, often helmet and gauntlets are often one of the first things they buy because they're the first things you need. So, can you tell us a bit about these particular gauntlets?
Well, these are more of, and again in the Italian style. You have this slight hourglass shape here. They're half gauntlets, so there's not an incredible amount of articulation in the fingers. And it might be a slight issue with rein control because I won't be able to bring the rein all the way down into the gaps of my fingers. But especially for foot combat, it's more protective because you'll be able to use your fists more effectively. Also, if you're having that nice, lovely poleaxe in your hands, you're practically covered in actual plates the entire visible length of the poleaxe, at least the bit that your opponent can see. So it's much better protected. On the other hand, less articulation for riding purposes might be a bit of a problem.
My concern, having 20 years jousting experience, what you tend to see here, these are great for foot combat, as Nick was saying, but you look at the angles of some of these with the lance, and the fact that when he's got to couch the lance, he's got to bend his wrist here. Well, he's got to go from here to here. You can already see I'm having to bend this wrist. He's now having to force against this piece of metal,
Yeah.
So that may cause him an issue. He's also got the fact that this, while it's got a lot of protection here, there's no big manifer here. Again, it hasn't got the, like you start to see in the jousting armours, they had a big manifer. It was a one single big piece of metal.
Yeah.
And the reason they did that is because it's more impact dispersal. There's more steel to disperse the impact through, as where this is obviously.
Also, on English gauntlets of the period, you tend to have a sort of a dagger-like or spade-like solid shape here, and these lames come all the way up the glove.
Yeah.
So that would mean he would only be covered to about here. But because this is unhinged, not attached to the hand, he would be able to grip the reins fully and allow it to play through his hand while still having this part protecting both the rein and the hand.
So if you think about a manifer, inside your manifer, your hand is, like Rupert said, the plate is here, your hand is away from the plate. So you've got all this movement and flexibility to play around with your reins inside, but without any restriction. And if you do get hit there, well, basically, obviously, there's a big plate there so it'll be interesting to see, obviously, with Nick how he finds that.
I mean,
So these are essentially really a compromised design, aren't they? They've got they're part mitten, part fingered, trying to have some advantages of both. But often when you compromise, you lose as well as gain.
And jousting is like, say, if you think about what Nick's going into here, it's not like a foot combat. Yeah. It's a huge amount of preparation if you've seen him getting ready for here.
Yeah.
And a run is probably 5 to 10 seconds.
Yeah.
That's it. And if anything, one thing isn't working, then that's going to cost you.
Yeah.
Or it's working against you, it's taking more energy, it's taking more effort, then you're going to wear out quicker. So these are things he'll have to learn.
We quite often refer to what we call bad armour days. There's something's about half a centimetre out of true here and a centimetre out of true there, and the harness stops working with you and starts working against you. It slows your reaction time, and it increases the rate at which you tire.
The fatigue of it, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting watching Mark Hale at the last training session. It's his first time using the lance in his armour. He did 6 passes and he was done. He just couldn't lift the lance anymore. He didn't have the strength. Because obviously, Nick's got now all this extra weight here. He's now having to work against. Yeah, if anything's not working well, he's now working against him. So he's like Rupert was saying, he's using more energy. He's now got a 3 pound, 3 kg lance that he's got to wield around. So you start to burn out, and then I think some jousters, I think Chris Paling, his first race, riding in, he's throwing his arm around, waving, and that was it. He was done. Because he's burnt all of his energy waving his arm around.
Talking about the energy and the burning, you've also got the heat issues. This traps a heck of a lot of heat.
I was going to ask about the heat,
yeah. Your body starts warming, your core temperature rises, and then rises, and then rises. And heat exhaustion is a big problem.
Yeah.
For those of us that fight on foot in some of the recreational battles, sort of Bosworth and Tewkesbury, being in armour for 2 to 3 hours in high heat, I've seen 20-year-olds just go face down. They just can't take it.
And because you think about how we lose heat, I've just put my hat on. I'm already getting too warm because of the heat. I'm not obviously lose a lot of heat out of your head.
That's where as far as it
As
goes.
soon as he puts that helmet on, the heat's got nowhere to go.
So,
and 25, 30 degree heat,
yeah.
you're essentially wearing another.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys have worn armour a lot more than me. I have heard, obviously we know that you get very hot in summer and in the heat. I've never tried it, but I've heard that you could get really chilly in cold weather.
Yes, I've had hypothermia on a film set.
So it's a radiator that works in 2 directions, isn't it? If it's hot, it makes you hotter, and if it's cold, it makes you colder.
The sad thing is about the armour is, like I say, it's almost never the perfect weather conditions. It's either too hot or it's too cold.
Well, the human body wasn't designed to wear this, really, was it? So,
But then, like I say, you see them fighting in winter and wearing armour and everything else. I think, like I say, when you're moving around and you're working, heat builds up inside it.
Yeah.
But you were just standing around, obviously.
Do you want me to open it again?
Yeah, open it again, put it back on again.
So let's have a look at this.
In there.
I think you're going to have to wear one of those masks inside of there.
So this is an Armet, isn't it?
Yeah.
So-
And it's Armet.
So let's tell the viewers what defines an Armet is essentially these cheek pieces, isn't it? So it closes.
They gull wing round the chin.
And a lot of people don't like wearing armets, because basically the armet is very closely fitting to your face, as you can see there, Nick. It's really sitting, right down here. And
Right. Stace, can you support his visor while I get the wrapper on? On down, sir. On down. Stacey's got it.
To me, the Armet always looks very close to the chin.
Under or over?
I wonder what it's like to be if you ever accidentally get struck by a lance
Well,
in
you
that
won't
area.
feel it because the wrapper is obviously, there's a gap between the wrapper and the where they're down inside of the.
Which hole do we go for? Is there just one?
Just one.
So for the uninitiated, let's just explain that what the wrapper is this additional, almost prow-like plate
Oh, there we are. That's
over the front of the Armet, and that's.
Right. No.
I can imagine when they invented the Armet. So the Armet comes in about 1390, 1400, its first invention, and it was quite popular, particularly in Italy, of course, by about 1430, perhaps even earlier. But because it joins at the chin, we can't see the joining plate now.
Does it go
I can
underneath?
see. I can see why they would have quite early on, and we know they did quite early on, add the wrapper, because I guess from their point of view, the weak point or the joining point is over the chin. So they kind of thought, let's cover that up.
No, you do the other side. It's going to go. So again, you can see here, we're using wax linen points, which are great. But now we've put all the helmet on everything. We now need to see how much that's gone up. Well, it's gone up by an inch.
Wow,
inch and a half, yeah.
And that is a mass. That's really important. It's important the squire understands that, because if this isn't sitting up this high, and it's not sliding over the top of this plate, then it's going to keep catching underneath it,
Right.
and it's going to get very angry.
And this,
very
this
quickly.
raises an important part. Hollywood would have us believe that a squire has a really rubbish life. You would treat your squire like your son. If they don't put your armour on properly, you die. So you will find references. Do you just like to raise that one, sir? Down again? There's one that I really like where they say there are 3 people that know a knight's body well: his wife, his mistress, and his squire. And of these 3, the squire knows it best. Because you would become, you know, a squire would know if you'd put on like a quarter of a stone, there'd be this sucking of breath, and you're going to have to lose a bit of weight.
Yeah.
That's one of the major things. The armour doesn't stretch in any way, shape or form, so you have to maintain the body that you had when the armour was made for you.
Unless you're Henry VIII and you can afford lots and lots of armours.
Yeah, indeed. If you're that rich, you can.
Was that your first time in this harness on the horse?
Well, second time, but pretty much yes. I mean, at every time you're on with the harness until you feel comfortable enough with it is as if it's the first time again.
Right.
It's a learning experience every time.
So what sort of things were you experiencing that time?
Well, considering that this is the first time the Armet has been used with the harness on horseback, there's a level of sensory deprivation that you need to get used to, both in terms of hearing and tactile, because the points of contact with the horse are no longer as effective as they are without the harness.
Right.
So it's a level of movement that you need to get used to again.
Is it like being a bit sort of desensitized in a way? You're
a little numb. Yes,
yeah,
you're slightly numb, especially in the important bits that you need to communicate with the horse.
Right. So any thoughts about how the harness is working, or things you might want to change, or?
Well, the harness has only done some very, very basic things. So it's early days yet. It really needs some more work. There has to be put through its paces on horseback in full. So the points that were made earlier, for example, that some parts may not be suitable for the joust.
Yeah.
So we might need to have a second set of gauntlets made. All that and more. But for the time being, it's still early days. Very, 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 very early. It's going to be a journey, I can tell you that.
Good. Well, good luck. It was fun to watch. Thanks for letting us share.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.